right, so next we have the anti-racism panel. That is going to be moderated by Fletcher Sharpe. Also we'll have Bilal Saeed. We'll also have Kristi Oshiro, Anthony Weems, Brandon Miller, and Hugh Roberts. So I will let Fletcher take this one away.
Hello, my name is Fletcher Sharpe. This is the panel about building anti-racist soccer clubs. A little bit about myself before we start. My connection to the panel, obviously, for those watching, I'm a minority. I have a long history in soccer. I'm a sports journalist, mainly covering soccer. Brief college career, played 1 year, uneventful, but I've been fascinated with how race interweaves within sports, specifically soccer, especially because it's a very worldly sport. You look anywhere else in the world and you see a rainbow of faces, a plethora of different skin tones on the field, and you look at youth levels in the U.S. and typically you see one or two. And I'm interested in how we can kind of reverse that so that the sport that can be enjoyed by everybody is actually enjoyed by everybody in the U.S., as opposed to being enjoyed by the select few. I think that's probably the best way to start. And I know that's something I've really cared about. And I know it's something, to a degree, everyone on this panel cares about, or else they would not be here today. So get brief introductions for everybody. Do people want to introduce themselves, or do you want me to introduce them for them?
Whatever you're feeling.
I like to let people talk to themselves a little bit, that way I don't mess up their story a little bit. Do you want to start first, Bilal?
Yeah, sure. My name's Bilal Saeed. I'm chair of AFC and Arbor. I'm just really appreciative of Avi for the work that he's put, into this conference, and for giving us the opportunity to use part of the conference to discuss something that's super important. My background is obviously is a business executive, I guess you could say, in the game. And so, the conversation for me is super important because it's simply that we need to be doing more. Racism is prevalent in the game today at all levels, in the boardroom, in the locker room, in the stands. And currently that burden to fight racism is put on players. Other than some club statements, what actions have really been taken? And I'm not saying all clubs are racist, but almost all clubs are not anti-racist, because actions are what will shape any sort of actual change. And the statements teams have to put out say one thing, but the actions or inactions from the leaders in that organization are say another. So, you might hear, we support Black Lives or Black Lives Matter, but what are the actions to support that? And the reality is that most teams are owned and operated by white males. And as you'll hear more from Brandon and Hugh when he joins, but as the USL Black Players Alliance has said before, if we're not represented on the field, how are we truly going to be heard? And I've always said, if the black and brown players feel underrepresented, imagine how those communities feel. So that's only amplified in black cities, and even in towns like Ann Arbor and Ypsi that are segregated cities within one county. So this is how we begin to explore real action steps to implement. And this doesn't mean put out a statement and pass that burden onto the players of color. This is about examining why we play the national anthem, sports organizations' relationship to police, and what we can do to better gain black and brown representation at all levels in the game. And so for me, I'm not an expert. And number one, I want to listen to black and brown players. So thank you for Hugh and Brandon. Hugh will be joining us a little later, but thank you for Brandon for spending time with me and other people over the past few months to help us better understand those concerns and those needs from our players of color. And then also thanks to our scholars who are joining the panel today, Kristi and Anthony, because like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just here to take that first step for owners and business executives that says it's okay, we haven't done enough in the past, and it's time to do more. And this panel, I'm going to be taking notes, because this is what we need to do. We need to listen.
All right, so I'll jump into first guest. Everyone here is very, very important, so let's just go in the order that I have. First, one of the co-founders of the USL's Black Player Alliance, entrepreneur, activist, amazing goalkeeper, USL champion as well, Brandon Miller. So, Brandon, thank you for taking some time today to join us on this call. It's very important, as Bilal said. Really appreciate the time you're giving us. What made you take the step to help start and organize the USL BPA?
Well, first, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the intro. The USL BPA came about really off of basically a podcast episode. Hugh Roberts, who's going to join a little bit later, he started the Backyard Footy podcast, and he came to me probably one day in May and was just like, hey, let's put together a podcast episode and just have a bunch of Black soccer players from, around our league, around MLS, international, whoever we can get on to just have a conversation. Because around this time, there was a lot going on, whether it was a George Floyd murder, other murders that were happening, and you can see a lot of civil unrest, and so it was weighing heavily on a lot of us, and so we wanted to put together an episode to kind of have a conversation, basically just like we're having now, have a conversation between those players and see, share their experiences and see what their thoughts were with the current climate, and see what we could do as Black men and Black athletes to kind of affect what was going on. And so after that first podcast episode, we started to realize like these are conversations that we had to have. Like we had guys in MLS, guys who had played overseas, guys who played at the national team level, who were sharing the same experiences that Hugh and I were having conversations about every day in the locker room. And so we realized, we had one episode, and Hugh put together a second episode, and for me it was really cathartic. It was really helpful to see other Black men like myself who play professional soccer, but also have daily experiences that are similar, simply because we're Black. And so once we had those couple of episodes and we continued the conversation, it pretty much just rolled from there. We grabbed a few different guys in the league and had another Zoom call, and just were having conversations about, hey, what can we do as a group to affect this league? And then eventually, MLS Black players announced their organization, and we just looked at each other and we were like, hey, we need to do this for the USL because this can be really impactful. And so, it took a few months to get everybody organized and formed and have all the conversations we needed to have, but here we are now. And our mission and our goal is to be impactful. And I think what we have working right now, it definitely can be impactful for the future.
So just to pivot from there, quick question. I know you said you can see it being impactful. How do you see it being impactful? Like, aside from just announcing the issues that players that are Black and brown are going through, how can you see it being impactful, I guess, for a wider audience? So it's just not, I know it's mainly focused on Black and brown faces, but how can you make it so that everyone can understand exactly what they're going through, even if they are not Black and brown or yellow?
Well, our goal is to continue to have conversations with the league, with individual clubs, on what we think the best route is moving forward in terms of the diversity within the league. We've had multiple discussions with league executives about how we can make changes to show more diverse faces in their office, so that those faces who are making the decisions, the major decisions for our league and trickle down to those individual clubs, are more diverse, and those boardrooms are more diverse, so that we're having representation in those boardrooms. Our mission is to impact diversity at every single level of soccer, whether it's the youth level, collegiate level, professional level, the international level, where we, U.S. soccer, what do those boardrooms look like, right? We want to make sure that diversity, not just Black and brown faces, men or women as well. We want everyone's voice to be heard, therefore making a better landscape for everyone. But we also want to implement initiatives that are going to impact the youth, so we can form ourselves as role models for the next generation, because that's really what we want. We want people in higher roles that we can aspire to, and we want the next generation to have people that we can aspire to, and we want to create these programs that will help expand soccer into more diverse communities, lower income communities that may not have the opportunities. I know there's a lot of grassroots programs now, and that doesn't discount what they're doing. We want to expand what they're doing. We want to throw gasoline on the fire of what they're doing so that it can grow and soccer can grow as a diverse sport in this country.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for your time. Next, we have speaking assistant professor of sports management at Western Carolina University, Anthony Weems. Anthony is also, excuse me, is also the founder of the Sporting Justice Collective. So, Anthony, thank you for being here with us. For you, what goals do you have for the SJC and how it can help in tie into today's conversation?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on this panel. It's really kind of humbling, I think, to be a part of this conversation, especially coming from, you know, the academic world. Anytime our work can actually impact real change, I think that that's what a lot of us really yearn for. Let me kind of briefly talk about what the collective is and what we do before I maybe talk about how we play into this picture. Really kind of emerging out of that same context that Brandon talked about earlier. I mean, following those murders and really the anti-racist action and movement at large, this really kind of galvanized a lot of us to do more than write on it in our rooms and on our computers. So we formed the Sporting Justice Collective, which is a collaborative platform designed to connect scholars, athletes, and activists. We look to facilitate knowledge and resources, and ultimately to impact policy in the sport industry. So our collective is specifically focused on anti-racism and decolonial pursuits in and through sport. So both anti-racism and decolonization necessitate a deep understanding of how systemic oppression takes place, as well as strategies and mechanisms for dismantling those systems. And so oftentimes this means challenging and even reimagining the role that sport plays in society. So in the United States, racism is something that is so deeply ingrained in our society that we have to be actively anti-racist, especially if we're going to fight for an equitable future. This is something that has to be done in perpetuity. So it's to that end that we ended up partnering with AFC Ann Arbor and with the Black Players Alliance of the USL to begin exploring ways to do this, right? So how can we change organizational structures? How can we impact our communities? How can we make soccer, this beloved and vibrantly growing sport, anti-racist? So these are the kinds of things that we're exploring together to try to bring about real lasting change. So that's kind of where we fit in and what we hope to kind of get out of working together with everyone here.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. This is a great great lead into the next person we have speaking. Associate professor of sports administration at Belmont, Kristi Oshiro, who's also a part of the Sporting Justice Collective. Some of Kristi's positions. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about why representation is so important on all levels of sport.
Sure. I think I missed the first part of your question. Can you just repeat that?
Some of your research explores underrepresentation of minorities in executive positions. So maybe you could tell us tell us a bit more why representation is important on all levels of sport.
Perfect. Thank you so much. First and foremost, again, I want to give a big shout out to Bilal and all the conference organizers for creating this space for us to partake in this much needed discussion. I'm very grateful to be virtually sitting alongside these amazing panelists who are all using sport as a vehicle in some way to make an impact both on and off the field. So thank you all for the work that you have and continue to do. I certainly appreciate it, and I know a lot of people do too. Going back to that question, that's such a tough question because for me, the question is, when does representation not matter? sport is said to be this microcosm of society, but in terms of representation, particularly as you turn to those who occupy positions of power and privilege, the numbers simply just do not reflect the dynamic, multicultural world that we live in. For me, as an Asian American woman who has played in sport as a student athlete, I worked in college athletics, and now study sport, which is this predominantly white, heterosexual, able-bodied male sporting space. I can speak from experience in saying that for me, representation is personal, it's professional, and representation means being the person that I never seen working in sport and working alongside other people, other women of color, to pave the way for others who may also be interested in working in this space. So we have to be mindful, right, that sport is not just fun and games. Sport is this powerful political institution that has tremendous influence on a global scale, and a place where socialization occurs for young people especially. So with that being said, representation matters at all levels, right? From coaches in youth sport to stakeholders in professional sport and everything in between, at the individual, organizational, and societal levels. For example, at the organizational level, I'll pull some research into it because we're supposed to be offering the scholarly perspective here, right? Studies show that there are positive benefits for minorities when there's an ethnic minority leader to look up to, as this can be empowering, inspiring, allow people to feel heard and seen, supported. This kind of diversity can influence diversity at the organizational level. However, we have to be not only diverse, but inclusive, right? Representation of minority groups is imperative because it illuminates the voices and the stories of a broader array of lived experiences. And for me, these powerful counter narratives can create many benefits in and of itself, creating organizational cultures of inclusion, having the ability to better serve diverse communities of people, and all the great things that we would love to think sport can do. And this can really serve as a catalyst for change at the societal level. And really the last point I want to make here is that for this to happen, diversity has to be more than just happy talk, right? It has to go deeper than the surface. It has to be intentional if we want to make real change happen. So needless to say, I know that was a long-winded answer, but representation matters. But I would like to be clear that representation is just the first of many steps that have to be taken, in my opinion, if we actually want to work towards re-envisioning sport as a space that's more socially just, inclusive, equitable, and what we're here to talk about today, anti-racist.
Some people would say long-winded. I just say that means very thorough. So I appreciate that. I'm sure other people appreciate that.
I like that.
We're going to pivot back to Brandon really quickly. Again, with the USL PBA, you mentioned the goals you guys had coming in to try to fix some of the issues you guys saw. Why are those your goals? How did you come to those? And how can you increase the focus so that everyone can be as mindful of what's happening as you guys are?
Well, we came to a lot of the decisions that we made, basically just having conversations. Like I said earlier, we had the podcast episodes, and then we had plenty of Zoom calls afterwards. And I mean, there were plenty of Zoom calls where it was just basically guys venting, what issues they've had to deal with, what issues they're currently dealing with. And so it was basically just, guys taking notes and saying, hey, this subject came up a lot, this subject came a lot. So those are the things that we need to focus on. And I mean, just looking at, the landscape of soccer, we looked at what exactly we want to change. What do we think we can be most impactful with, and what do we see as being need for change in order to be more impactful for U.S. soccer as a whole. And so the decision to really focus on diversity in in the boardrooms and in the front offices and the coaching staff is that those are things that personally affect us, because you have a lot of guys in our group who have the potential to be head coaches, whether it be at the college level, the youth level, or the professional level. You have a lot of guys who could step into front office roles or into league office roles, but they don't know how. One, we talk about representation. They don't really see a clear path because they don't have the representation there. They may not have the connections. They may not have the motivation that other people do because they don't see those faces in those roles. And so those are things that we want to fix, for the benefit of our group, but also for the benefit of the future of U.S. soccer, because, we talk about having the representation in the room. Representation in the room is necessary because we need our voices in those rooms. A lot of, people may not understand different cultures, and so therefore they're making decisions for a wide variety of people that they just don't simply understand. And if you don't have the opinion or the foresight or the insight from these other groups, then it's hard to make the proper decisions for a large group of people. And so that's why we want to be able to diversify those rooms in order to make better decisions for leagues where you look at MLS, you look at USL. These are leagues that have a large contingent of minority athletes, and if the boardrooms, the front offices don't reflect those players on the field, then those players aren't truly being represented. And so that was the main mission behind our diversity in the front office kind of initiative. But a lot of the other initiatives are just in terms of like youth soccer initiatives or partnerships that we want to work with, like with the Sporting Justice Collective. Those are just decisions that we felt were necessary to further the conversation, not just around soccer, but just around social injustice as a whole. Because while soccer is big, it's just a microcosm of our country and the issues that are happening in our country. And so we want to be impactful on the field. We want to be impactful in the soccer world, but we also want to be impactful in our communities as a whole.
So quickly before I move forward, I have a question to bring back to that. You said you're helping players who might want to take front office positions or coaching positions. You're helping them kind of, I guess, acclimate to those roles later in their career if they chose to do that. How are you guys doing that? It seems really interesting.
So we recently started what we call a professional development series, and Anthony Hopkins, who was a former sideline reporter, he's worked within U.S. soccer. He works with NFL athletes. He's done a lot, and he's been really helpful with that. It's basically a series where we bring on different professionals from different business aspects. Whether most recently we had a financial advisor from Morgan Stanley. Anthony, our first one was with a real estate investor. And so we want to give guys different ideas and different avenues to explore, so that they can start building their brand and start learning more about the business world, which eventually we're all going to have to hop into. And so our group is not just to be impactful in soccer, right? We want to develop individuals who can be impactful within our society, within the communities that we work at. So we're creating the tools for them, the resources for them to explore other avenues other than just soccer.
Awesome. That's a really great initiative, because so many times you see in others, also sports, you see many times people make references to, like, I'll use football as an example. Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, being one of the winningest, or if not the winningest, black coach in NFL history. And you look at the comments on Facebook or something, and someone's always like, well, why does it matter about this? Why does it matter if this coach is the most winningest coach, black coach? He should, it should just be coaches, period. And then you have someone coming back with, there's only this X amount of coaches. And I've always wondered myself, and I'm sure other people have as well, how players make the transition from being on the field to being in the front office or being on the sideline with the headset, because just these aren't things you really think about. You just think it's a natural progression. Some people might have someone they know who they can talk to and count on in terms of helping them. And typically with minority players, for the most part, unfortunately, a lot of cases, they don't have those same connections unless they were like supremely talented or superstar athletes. And that's not every single athlete who plays the game. And not everything should be super fair for everybody. But if someone will want to make a transition from the field to the press box or from the field to the head coaching line or to the front office, they should be able to get the same amount of chances as someone else would. So
yeah, I mean that's really what we want to do. Is you talked about it, build the connections and build the relationships, because honestly, those are what's key to getting into those roles. I mean, if you look at some of the USL players or even MLS players that play in the league a long time, what better person who who has played soccer in your league for so long, and who a lot of these guys have impressive resumes off the field. We have entrepreneurs, we have people with MBAs and important business degrees. What better person to continue to run and build your league, and a great marketing tool for yourself as a league, than to bring in the players who help build your league on the field and now can continue to help that growth off the field. And that's our mission, is to continue to build those connections and relationships so guys can make those seamless transitions.
awesome. Now I want to bring in Anthony and Kristi to the discussion to help talk about what building anti-racist practices within soccer clubs really means. Because to me, it just feels like something that you could just say, hey, we're making a club, don't be racist. Like, it should be as simple as just, we're making a club, we're making a team, we're going to play like this, don't be like this. I obviously don't have practice running a team like that, but everyone's played recreational sports. Everyone's had teammates in recreational sports who seem like they would be great teammates. And then you have someone next to you who just makes a really horrible comment, and you're like, how do I react to this? How would I build this? And I just figured that we could go out here and do something and all be of common sound mind and, thought. And instead, someone's out here saying some really awful, horrible, racist, hurtful things to somebody. So how can someone go about doing that on a much larger scale and do that successfully?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I can get us started with that one. I think it's important, first and foremost, to think about building anti-racist practices within soccer clubs doesn't hurt anybody, right? If anything, it enhances the experience for everyone and also creates more opportunities and access to more people. But before we start into tangible things that can be done, I think I kind of approach this question thinking about why soccer. Why is this such a great opportunity and platform to push this agenda? And first and foremost, as we all know, the presence of soccer clubs and the connectedness to their communities historically and in contemporary times is so special and unique to this sport, right? This is a global sport with a global fan base. And for a lot of these fans, the soccer club is community. It's more than just a sport. It's a relationship. It's more than a game. It's a way of life. It's the morals, values that are deeply embedded into the culture. So by being able to implement these anti-racist practices into the sport club, that can have such a tremendous impact into the community and vice versa. And with the changing demographic of society and spectators and participants of sport, this becomes more imperative than ever before to do this now and not wait any longer to take action. In addition to this, I think when we look at soccer in the US in particular, it's a growing sport. It's expanding. I mean, I know I'm home based in Nashville. We just got, Nashville SC. Think about a club that's in year 2, right? Still in its infancy in terms of the MLS. If they could perhaps start adopting some of these anti-racist practices and agendas from the get-go and know nothing but that way of doing, how powerful that would be for continued growth of this organization and the impact that they could have in the Nashville community. That's just one example, but that can be adopted elsewhere. It's these little things that I think we find so important as scholars, as educators, to work with you all, right? As practitioners, as athletes, as people working and wanting to make this change in and through the sport of soccer. And I think it's a beautiful thing to see such a diverse panel come together and start having these conversations that we all have thought about long before this moment in time. So with that being said, soccer can really serve as a blueprint for other sports to follow. And it's a really great fit in terms of the fan base, participants, so on and so forth. So I'll hand it over to Anthony to talk about some of the more tangible things that can be done.
Yeah, thank you, Kristi. So yeah, I kind of, when I was thinking about this question, that the phrase anti-racist practice kind of stuck with me, right? So what does this practice really look like? Because as we've seen, as we've kind of talked about here, we've seen a lot of happy talk around this stuff. You look at someone like the NFL with end racism, in the end zones there, but they're not doing anything practically or structurally to legitimately become anti-racist. So what does this really mean? Because anti-racism and anti-racist practice requires us to think outside of the dominant way of doing things. It means that that this becomes a necessarily transformative process, both personally and organizationally. So there is no way to become anti-racist and to stay the same. It is transformative, especially in the United States, where we have systemic racism going far beyond the individual. We need to transform and radically transform these kind of structures and systems. So we have to understand that, and we have to be very intentional whenever we're thinking about these practices. So I think Kristi talked about this earlier, that there is an intentionality to this, or maybe it was Bilal, but we have to be very intentional about being anti-racist, okay? Yes, diversity is a larger part of this. Yes, inclusion is a larger part of this, but those come with it. What we're trying to do is build an anti-racist soccer club. So what does that kind of look like in a practical sense? Another aspect to that is that it has to be a collective effort. So it really does take athletes, communities, organizational representatives, outside experts. It takes everyone working together to even begin to form what this idea of an anti-racist soccer club might look like. So that's kind of first and foremost. Now, when we get to the actual practices and kind of tangible things that we can do, I'm going to kind of cheat here, and I'm going to pull a little bit. So one of my colleagues, Dr. Kwame Ajiman, he just recently wrote something with Mackenzie Rector, both from The Ohio State University, kind of on how sport organizations can more legitimately respond, especially to Black Lives Matter. But like I said, so what we've seen, over the summer, we saw a lot of glitz and glam in the sport industry. So how do we take this seriously? From a practical standpoint, because everyone wants those takeaways, what can be done? So the first point that they talk about is a chance to really discover. So giving employees a chance to discover. So they suggest offering full-time employees paid time off at the discretion of their manager to go actually get involved in the community. So that this provides, an opportunity for white and non-Black professionals to kind of better understand racial injustice in the United States, and kind of give them a chance to actually learn more about what's going on. So not just a training module that they do online or something like that, but actually getting into the community, meeting with people there, understanding those struggles and things like that. Successes, needs, wants, desires, everything. The second part is forgetting about the business case for diversity. So we've spent a lot of time, especially academics, trying to, talk about the business case for diversity, quantify how much, this could help creativity and bottom line profits and things like that. Ultimately, and this is what they say in the article, the sport industry needs to kind of forget about that. It's not just commercially convenient, which the research does show that it can be, but sport industry leaders need to pursue this because it's the right thing to do. And also, you know, whenever you do that, kind of like what Kristi was talking about with the importance of soccer in communities and in society, whenever you do that, then your club is going to be in a better position to compete for, you know, more competitive employees that will want to be there because they want to work for a socially conscious and purpose-driven organization. Your players are going to be more satisfied working there. You're probably going to have a more diverse staff, things like that. The third one, don't rely on free labor. So this has been a very big issue, but this double duty of relying on a person of color to lead change efforts, but not necessarily rewarding them. And we've seen a lot of this over the last 8 months or so. This is really an unfair burden that is not asked of white people. So we need to just scratch this whole free labor idea and doubling up on labor. So leaders of organizations, especially soccer clubs, should take the lead on that and rely on other organizations and consultants who actually focus on doing this type of work. So that's a tangible thing that can be done. Fourth, a lot of you have kind of hit on this from various angles. Give Black professionals a seat in the C-suite. And I can't say that one enough. But we need people. We need Black people and we need people of color. We need a diverse C-suite executive board. It has to be diverse. Otherwise, we're just going to be re-articulating a lot of these problems that those white men that Bilal spoke about, that those white men created, that we have created and continue to reproduce. We need to get different people in those seats. And we need to be intentional about that and kind of attack it with a veracity, really. And then lastly, embedding diversity into the core of the organization. So it's not just about, you know, one wing or one department of an organization that is going to lead anti-racist efforts or something like that. It's not just a PR initiative or something like that. This needs to be embedded throughout the entire organization, that it has to become everyone's responsibility to do anti-racist work, not just one department. So it has to be an integral part of the core business model. So again, that's from Kwame Ajiman and, excuse me, Mackenzie Rector. But that's what they say sport organizations can do to really kind of take that next step towards anti-racism. Because right now, a lot of organizations are kind of on that in-between now. You know, they have been shaken by the context of this year, but how do we move forward? So hopefully, you know, those can be a few tangible takeaways for organizations to actually look to grow and develop in an anti-racist direction.
Thank you both for that. I want to bring Bilal into this, ask him a question about it as well. Building anti-racist practices within soccer clubs, would you say that also goes from the players to the front office, but also includes the fans in that discussion as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as Kristi mentioned, soccer clubs are part of the community and they have a stronger tie to community than some other sport organizations might. And, you know, for everybody on this call listening, we all have some connection to the game or some sort of, you know, appreciation for football. And we understand that. We really, really understand what the game means in terms of what it brings to our lives and how we connect with it. And so understanding that and the power of that, it's important to leverage that. And it's important for fans to demand more of their clubs. So, you know, hearing Brandon talk, you know, Brandon and I have gotten to know each other over the last few months. And I just feel like he's taken on such a burden, right? Like he was in season with Hugh when they formed the USL Black Players Alliance. That's a lot, you know. I think that we need to be doing more to support Black players and other minority players. But the fans in soccer have a unique, the supporters have a unique perspective of being able to put pressure on the owners. And sometimes there's clubs that you're part of the ownership, or you might have a community vote or a community say. Make your voices be heard. Demand more. You know, look at your front office, look at your organization. Where are the staff being hired from? Even if it's seasonal staff, is there something that can be done to engage the community better? I think when we look at the state of Michigan, specifically Southeast Michigan, you look at Dearborn and Detroit and where those intersect, you can hit a community that is Black, brown, and mixed of Middle Eastern, Mexican, Hispanic, different Hispanic backgrounds, Black backgrounds, mixed backgrounds. But so many of them are underprivileged and have been neglected. And, you know, just saying, oh, we want to support them and do something there, it's not, you know, got to get out there and do it. Now, what I'm saying is don't go to your Black player or your one Black staff member and say, hey, can you lead this initiative? The white people should be leading this initiative. The non-Black people should be leading this initiative. And when you look at soccer, our supporters are primarily white. And so I'm specifically calling on the supporters in the state of Michigan. Demand more from your clubs. I know we don't have that, those high-level pro organizations yet, but we have enough of a footprint of football, of soccer in this community that we should be demanding more of the owners. And I think that starts with my organization. I've been connected with the hooligans and the Main Street hooligans, and they want to see more being done. And I personally obviously do as well. So, you know, it's a priority. And Allie Curtis spoke to this earlier. You know, you have a choice as a club what your DNA is like. Do you want to be more player development minded? Do you want to just care about trophies? Do you care about community? Is there a balance in each of those? Well, what I'm saying is that AFC Ann Arbor is going to prioritize this, and other clubs should do the same.
Thank you so much, Bilal. I want to ask Brandon one more question. Two more questions overall before we get into some Q&A from the fans. Brandon, since you played in the USL Championship this past year, I'm sure you're probably pretty aware of what happened recently with San Diego Loyal and Los Angeles Galaxy, and then the Loyal also with Phoenix Rising. As a player who's been on the field with instances, I know that you've probably heard some charge talk back and forth. How are players supposed to react when they something like what happened with the Galaxy to the San Diego Loyal? How is a player supposed to react to that properly?
Are you saying the player that it's targeted at, or his teammates?
Either or. Well, I guess both situations.
I think ideally you want a similar situation to what happened with San Diego Loyal. You know, you see a leader like Landon Donovan who's willing to take his team off the field in the midst of a playoff battle and sacrifice the points because it's about more than sports. And I mean, I've even told my teammates that in the locker room as well. If something like that happens to you, I'm leaving the field, and I would hope that the rest of you are leaving the field as well, because there's been plenty of talk. I've heard plenty of people say, well, why don't you finish the game and have a discussion about it afterwards? That doesn't stamp out the racism in soccer, right? That just, like, we'll brush it aside until later, and that's not something that I'm willing to do. I don't think that's something that us as a soccer community can be willing to do anymore. I think we have to show that this is about more than soccer. It's about more than sport. This is about a systemic issue in our country, and if it's happening in our arena, which is the soccer field, then we have to take a huge stand towards it. And I think that how San Diego responded is definitely a talking point and a huge point in society and in our sport and our league that shows that, hey, this is no longer going to be accepted. And to kind of go on that point, I think we've had discussions with the league, and I think it's something that we're going to continue to develop especially for the 2021 season. But we as a league and we as individual clubs within the USL and hopefully MLS and US soccer as a whole have to really make it known what is acceptable and what's not acceptable on the field. We're a league that's very multicultural. There's a lot of different ethnicities, and certain things that are acceptable in one culture are not acceptable in another culture. And vice versa. And so the league has to do a better job of saying, hey, drawing a line in the sand, hey, this isn't acceptable, this is going to be the punishment. And obviously you've seen the reaction that they had to those situations, but we have to continue to make it known to each individual player, once you sign up to play in this league, this is what's acceptable and this is what's not acceptable. And then it has to be further amplified by the individual clubs to let each player, each coach, each staff member know this is not what we're going to handle.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to ask Kristi one more question as well. As we all know, as we just mentioned earlier, you're doing many great things on the academic side of college. Some people might not know, you also hit a very respectable 311 college at ECU, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So for those who are very much into the mold of traditional sports, who are like, sports is sports, I want to do this, I don't care about stuff off the field, I want to just keep it to this. How do you take your knowledge off the field and your knowledge and talent on the field and kind of help, I guess, in a way, change their mind? I'm trying to think of a better term, but change their mind's the best one I got right now.
Yeah, you know what, that's a tough question. And I came up playing in a different time than sports are today, right? Things constantly change, constantly evolve. It's been almost 6 years, I believe, since I was in college. But what I try to do is, because I have that unique perspective, being a student athlete, now studying sport, I try to bring voice to some of those issues from the player's perspective. But going back to your question here on changing people's minds, that can be a really, really tough thing in this journey. I think we have to be mindful and understand that people don't just, have these ways of thinking, right? They're deeply embedded based on their culture, based on their upbringing. Systemic racism, systemic sexism, these things are very real. People like to think that sport, it's called, the great sports myth, that sport is all good and equal, it's a level playing field. What I try to do is just expose people to different perspectives, to different stories, that sport is good, but it also has its challenges and its shortcomings. I know with the students in my classes now that I teach, a lot of students have never been exposed to this counter narrative, to this other side of sport. And without having that understanding, they simply cannot do what they can to change the structure of sport. So having those tough, uncomfortable conversations, exposing them to different narratives, sharing stories, both personal and from other people who I've been fortunate enough to be in the presence of, I think bringing in diverse perspectives, these are all things that are going to help people learn, grow, and potentially change their mind about things and the way that they know, love, and view sport over time. But it is a continuous journey. I don't personally know the answer to how you can't change everybody's mind. And I think as people who advocate for this anti-racist agenda, I don't have to say it because I'm sure a lot of you know this very intimately. It's a journey, and to persist and resist against these norms weighs on you physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all of that, right? So I think just staying in check with yourself and knowing that you're doing the right thing, that you might not change their mind, but you're planting that seed in their head, is sometimes all that we can do as we continue this ongoing battle, so to speak.
Thank you. And Anthony, what's next for the SJC?
Man, that answer from Kristi kind of hit me in the soul right there. So that was it really it really is like that. So for the collective moving forward, so we're still very new. We're still getting things going. It's been kind of a vibrant start, but really moving forward, we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to creatively engage. So moving into 2021, we'll be unveiling our podcast. We'll be creating more video content. and hopefully moving in the direction of a documentary or some sort of short film. So a major emphasis for us is making this information tangible and digestible, so that we can get it into the hands of the people who need it the most. So it doesn't matter if that's a community organizer or if that's the president of a major sport franchise. For us, it is about highlighting and amplifying the work that's being done, as well as the work that needs to be done, and kind of bridging that gap between those two. How do we get there? So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what's upcoming for us.
Let me see if we have time to answer a few of these questions that have been sent in. I did not see any of them until literally just now. I apologize. The first question I'm seeing right here, anonymous attendee, how do you get people to first communicate and then second, comprehend your message? And this is open for everyone on the panel.
I mean, I think it's a tough conversation to have, and it makes people uncomfortable. And so the best way I've been able to go about it is simply just trying to be open and honest with people, and gauge the reactions, and kind of move from there. It's not always going to be something where you're not going to be able to solve it, in a 30-second or 2-minute or even a 10-minute conversation, but constantly engaging with people and showing your side of things and showing your raw emotions and being honest with people is the best way I've been able to have those conversations. I mean, they're not easy on either side.
If anyone else has anything to add to that question, I'll move on to the next one really quickly. I know we're running out of time. Second question from Leslie Batica. Hopefully I'm not butchering your name. If I am, I'm sorry. Is any collaboration with any other sports leagues that have lack of diversity in management/coaching, such as the NBA or NFL? Or is there anything that you are seeing other sports organizations doing to improve diversity that the soccer league should also adopt? Again, this is open for anybody.
I mean, I've seen NBA and NFL owners have committed to investing in lower income communities, and so that's great. A lot of that's great. That's a good start. But I think even more so for me, and I've had this conversation with our league, and I've had this conversation with a number of owners, is like it has to start within, right? It has to start within your own organization, because throwing money at it is not an issue for someone who's worth tens of millions of dollars. Right? But how do we fix the actual organization, the structure of an organization, the mission of an organization, so that they have the core values that are inherently anti-racist, as opposed to simply saying, "Hey, look, I give $100,000 to the NAACP, so that we're not a racist organization." So I don't intimately know what a lot of these owners and leagues are doing in other leagues, but I know that that's our mission with the USL Black Players Alliance.
Thanks, Brandon, for answering that. So I know we're kind of bumping up against the end of our panel here, and there's still some questions left. So I'm going to go ahead and suggest that we kind of continue the conversation, because that's the important thing that's sparked from today. So any questions that didn't get answered, we're going to move over to Twitter at AFC Ann Arbor. If Kristi, Dr. Weems, we need your help answering some of those questions, demanding more time from you guys. But a lot of the questions revolve around, like, what can we do as fans, as people in the industry, as supporters of the game? What can we do? And one, listening today is important. Two, always keep your ears open, listen, and learn. We have to educate ourselves, right? And that was one of the big things that we tried to accomplish between the conversation here today, was connecting the scholarly world with the actual sport world, and then obviously hearing and listening from the players. So attending today's discussion is step one. What do we do from here? Educate. We have to learn. And this isn't just about sport. This is about what's caused systemic racism, how racism is currently being affecting Black players, brown players, and how the different those different things can affect them beyond just the game. So there's a lot that goes into it. And unfortunately, we're out of time, and it's a big conversation. So like I said, at AFC Ann Arbor, we're going to try and continue some of the conversation there, but I'll leave it with this. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists. It's such an important conversation, and especially thanks to Avi and Jacob for making this a priority, for having this conversation. This is a great conference, and you guys put on a really, really organized conference for students to be able to have the foresight to say, hey, this is a topic we want to see discussed and prioritize it. Super important. Thank you.
Well, the only thing I'd add before we go, not to steal a spotlight from anybody, to Bilal's point, is if you are a non-person of color, essentially a white person, and you're asking yourself how you can help, don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to be wrong. One of the worst things you can do is ask someone a question and they give you an answer on how to be better, in terms whether it's being a better ally, a better friend, better non-racist, quote unquote. And when they give you an answer that you don't like, is to get defensive and shut down, because that helps nobody. You don't learn anything, and the people you try to support aren't actually feeling supported. So again, like Bilal said, thank you to CSS for putting together a panel like this to allow people to ask these questions, get answers from people who actually know really deep answers and not just surface ones. And yeah, just an easier chance to allow people to see this and actually, grow.
Yeah, Fletcher, thank you very much, and thank you for leading this panel. Bilal, thank you as well for your kind words, and of course for your support throughout, this whole conference. Brandon, Kristi, Anthony, thank you as well for joining us. Guys, this has been a very, great conversation, a powerful conversation, and of course a necessary conversation. So, I'm sure that our attendees here today have taken a lot away from it, and hopefully we'll act upon it and continue the conversation. So thank you all again. And at this point, we do have to move on to the next panel. So I'm going to kick you guys back to the main room, but thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks for having
you.
us.